Live. All right. I think we are live on the Glass Box Podcast streaming.
Yes.
All right.
Yay. Hi,
Hi,
everybody.
everybody. How's it going? And nobody can answer that. So yeah, today we're doing a little bit of Q&A, but and if anyone does have any Q's, of course they can drop them in the chat or let us know, and we'll be happy to answer them. But more importantly, we are focusing on something that may be helpful, maybe useful for our listeners given the time of year. So while I invite our wonderful patrons over at patreon.com/glassboxpodcast, if they want to join the panel discussion, they are more than welcome to. You should have a link in your inbox in a few minutes. While I do that, Shannon, what are we talking about today?
Well, since we are here in the United States and Thanksgiving is coming up this Thursday, and we just had a crazy ass election, which was rather polarizing and everything else. We know that a lot of people do dread going to Thanksgiving with their Republican family members, especially the Republican religious family members, and trying to figure out how to be ready and have your armor up, and how do you deal with all of those crazy conversations you get there. Um, so we've just thought it might be fun to talk about how do you prepare yourself? How do you mentally prepare yourself to go into it? What do you have on hand to be ready to talk about? Things like that, so that you can deal with it, so you can come out of it without destroying relationships, and may help to at least do your part of making it a good experience for all of you there, so that you don't come out hating each other. And so, because I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of us, that's what we have to deal with. I am fortunate I'm not going to have to deal with that personally because of who I'm spending time with on this, but a lot of other people do. And I mean, we get it because, and this really does apply to more things than just Thanksgiving. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, that's another thing to think about. But it's like, how do you go into this where you're in their space and deal with the situation without caving or without arguing? And that's really what we're going to talk about. So, I
Right.
mean, I think about things like Catholic wedding I attended. It is not something I believe in at all. And this was for my daughter, and this was a few years ago. But as part of it, in the wedding, those who are walking up the aisle, when you get to the top of the aisle, one of the things you do is you bow to the, oh, I forgot what it's called. Something like the sanctuary, not the sanctuary, something like that. Anyway, it's this little area that's behind the altar. It's closed off, but it's in there, in the Catholic Church, it's where they believe that Jesus Christ resides. And that's where they keep the really special implements for certain things like the sacrament and all that kind of stuff. And so you bow to it because you're bowing to Jesus on that. I bowed. Did I believe any of it? No, of course not. I don't. I don't believe in Jesus Christ as this savior thing. However, I was in their home, and this is something that is done out of respect to them and their home. And so it's not me being a hypocrite, it's me being respectful. So that's
Right.
kind of how I see it. But it's also like a conversation I had recently. There's a friend, some friends of mine, a married couple who volunteer at the temple, and they do stuff at the baptistry and they do stuff in the sealing rooms, and they were dealing with missionaries because the missionaries are coming from the MTC there to do, the ordinances regularly, so they get bussed in. And they had this one group once who were just loud and obnoxious, and
Is
they
that because they're teenagers?
I know exactly, and it was so hard because the woman of this couple, she wasn't quite sure what to say or if she was allowed to say anything to them. And there's others, and she ended up at the end of it saying, well, I'm glad I was able to share this sacred experience with you today, which was kind of to sort of shame them a little bit. But, the sealer just wasn't really paying attention to them, was just hurrying through to get all these sealings done and everything else. And so it was very bothersome to this couple. because these kids were in there, they were cracking jokes, they were laughing very loudly, they were doing hand motions in the mirrors and all this kind of stuff, and you know all sorts of things. They were It was just very disrespectful. And so when they were talking about it, what I said to them, I didn't try to stay out of the conversation, I didn't do any of that. I says, you should contact the MTC because this isn't right. It's like, and we started going through what ways they could do it, what they could do, what they shouldn't do, what are the best ways to handle this. And then, we ended up determining that the husband would talk to their shift leader at the temple, explain the situation, ask for a call to be made to the MTC to talk about this district in particular, and what had happened, and ask that they be taught better, because they felt like if she did it, no one would listen. But if he did
Yeah,
it, then they
of
would.
course.
And they did. And it all worked through very smoothly, everything, and that the MTC sent back an apology. They had the district send an apology, the whole thing. And they said, we will train our missionaries more. And what I liked about the whole thing was no one I mean, they sort of were a little tense with me because they know where I come from on this, but that I was treating their concerns with respect. And so at the end of that, what I was able to do was also say, I think this is a problem with lowering the age of missionaries going out because they
Right.
still have that high school mentality. And I said that I says, I'm sure what happened is the strongest personality in there is the one cracking jokes about everything. I said,
Right.
if the strongest personality is showing respect, everyone else will because they all follow the leader.
Right. Right. And yeah, well, and teenagers, I mean, humans are pack animals, but teenagers are definitely
They
pack animals.
absolutely
Whoever's the
are.
bellwether, they're going to pay attention to, and whatever that person's up to, yeah, they're
Hmm.
setting the rules of the engagement, right?
And it's excellent you use that bellwether because for those who don't know, because I've mentioned it already in an episode, but I'm going to say it again because this is just really interesting. Bellwethers are the leader in a pack of sheep, in a herd of sheep. And it's not one where it's like, here's the herd and here's the bellwether up here. And everybody's like, oh, we got to follow them. Blah, blah, blah. No, that's not even it. The shepherd is more of a leader than the bellwether is. The bellwether is just one who's tiny bit smarter than the rest of the group. And they'll go, half an inch this way, and then the others half an inch, others like that. And so you can't even tell who the fucking bellwether is unless you monitor them by computer, really, and watch them over like a 5 hour period. And so it's not like they're really super smart. They're just a tiny bit smarter than all the other dumb animals. And sheep are stupid. I know turkeys are worse. Okay. That's for Tanner. Anyway, so or not Tanner, but Tyler, sorry.
Tyler,
So
yeah.
anyway, but that's a lot of what teenagers are like. And so what it takes is having a leader in there. If there's a leader who's respectful, then it will work better. But that's also humans. And it's the strongest personality in the group is the one who's going to lead, which
Yeah.
goes into this as well with Thanksgiving and everything else, because who is this? If you are the stronger personality going in, you could legitimately lead the group in such a way to keep the respect there for everybody.
Right. But I mean, what you're because I want to dive into that a bit, but like what you're talking about earlier, I think is a very important point to get across here, and it's a tool that astute listener Will M has given us, and it's that LARPing. You're
Yes.
you're choosing to agree to their established universe essentially, and playing within the confines of that universe. And you role play along with them. You can have a conversation with them that is very real, is very genuine, even if it is predicated on something that you personally you don't believe in. But you're LARPing for the sake of having a conversation, of building that relationship more, of of learning, of sympathizing with somebody, and something that they were going through in temple work, and being able to say like, oh, I understand what you're going through, and we can both agree that this is not a good thing. I'm sorry that that happened to you. And and being able to almost I don't want to say subversively, but being able to do that at the same time that you're communicating one of your concerns, and that is lowering the missionary age, like that's accomplishing it. That is using the LARP to accomplish effective communication, where otherwise, in any other context, you may not have been able to get that point across. You may not have been able to come to agreement with that person on a point like that.
Right.
So, like, that's to say that LARPing is kind of great within this larger context, and that's a great way to get through time with family is just to LARP along with them.
Yes. And really, if I had led with, oh, that's what happens when you get put 18-year-olds in this position,
Right.
no one would have heard a single thing I said the rest of the
Exactly.
time. That
Exactly.
brick wall would have gone up because you're taught in Mormonism, you're definitely taught that as soon as somebody says something even remotely anti, or somebody who's left the church says anything about the church, this 12-foot thick, 14 feet high brick wall goes up and they don't hear another thing you say.
Yep.
And I know exactly how to do that.
Well, and that's a look, and that's exactly the thing that you want to avoid when you're talking across a divide is having a barrier built up in between that divide. And as soon as that barrier is there, there's very little that you can do. There's very little to like walk it back or to try and break that back down. Like you have to reestablish so much rapport in order to fracture a wall that was constructed in the confines of that conversation. So
Exactly.
avoiding that at all costs is really kind of the overall approach to take is do not say things that are inflammatory. Do not say things that are going to get a rise out of somebody. And that comes down to rhetoric, right? Like
Mhm.
when people spout a rhetorical point, then that is designed to shut down the conversation. That is designed to carry the conversation in the desired direction of the person who is speaking the rhetoric. And when people feel like the conversation, they're having a conversation and that they are being dragged into a point through rhetoric, they're going to put up the barrier. They're going to be resilient to whatever point you're trying to make. And, you're not being an effective rhetorician if your rhetoric is shutting down all conversations.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean that works with politics as well as religion. It works with everything, honestly. Any types of those conversations where somebody doesn't like the way you live, period. I think
Mhm.
it works with any of these LGBTQ plus things because that's another thing there's people that are going to be dealing with is the whole issue of trans people has become much bigger and much more dangerous to them due to this recent election.
Mhm.
And that's frightening for a hell of a lot of people. And so, how do you deal with that? The Mormon Church has issued some dangerous statements about trans people as well. And it's just, yeah, all of this, it's like it's very scary for a lot of people going into a family holiday that's such a huge deal here in the United States. And I know a lot of them are just wanting to hole up in their home and just not even bother. And so, yeah, it's difficult.
Mhm. I mean, I'm traveling for Thanksgiving, but not for Christmas, right? So we're picking and choosing the family engagements that we are going to have for this holiday season, and everyone has to make those their decisions for themselves, right?
They do.
That's just how it is, right? And that's another point to get at with this communication as well is like picking your engagements, picking your the discussions, and putting yourself in a place where mentally you think you can have the conversation, or on the other side, if you don't feel like you're in a place where you can have an effective or useful or a conversation without it devolving into arguing or yelling or whatever, then choosing not to take those conversations, choosing to not put yourself in those scenarios, can oftentimes be the best choice for you as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's another big point to get across in this is when you're trying to communicate across divides, choosing your battles, picking what fights to take and what fights not to take, and that is at the higher level of where you are. Are you going to choose to go to this family engagement, or are you going to choose not to go? Is going to cause more friction than not going, or is your lack of presence there going to cause more friction? And like choosing those situations and kind of just weighing the costs of any direction that you make the choice. And it really is, it does have to be a cost analysis. Like what is
Mhm.
going to cost me the most? What is going to be the least costly decision? What is the decision that is going to lead to the least potential bad outcomes? And then, picking that choice. And that's not an easy thing, right? It's
No.
not something that calculus is not something that anybody can do for you. That's something you have to make a decision on yourself. That makes it all the harder, I think.
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
Yeah.
And I think also remembering there's a difference between an argument and a debate.
Totally. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And arguments just, nobody ever wins arguments.
yeah.
They just don't. Because I've never seen one where somebody comes out of it changing their mind. They stick stronger to their point. A debate, just debate between two people where you are freely exchanging opinions, differing opinions, and having this whole discussion. And you may come out of it still with your side, but you've shown respect to the other side. That's different.
Right, 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 right.
I think a lot of that comes down to respect, actually.
I think so. And I think there is kind of a fine line between debating and arguing. And like I think arguing is designedly more reactive, more like, oh, yeah, more of a jousting match. Whereas debate is more of chess, right? More of like a strategy and deploying tactics and when are you going to use this argument and whatnot. And I also think that arguing is for the people in the argument, debate is for the spectators, right?
That's it too.
And the idea with the debate is like, we get two people who, are diametrically opposed on something and an audience of people who are undecided, and whoever is the better debater, then that's the truth. That's not how it works, but that's the idea behind it, right? And so it's designed to be spectation based. And that's another calculus that you have to make, right? Because I'm thinking back to a family reunion that I went to. Not a reunion, more of a get together after a family event. And I was in let's just say, a bit of a discussion with a family member with whom I had disagreements, but I had younger cousins there who I think I made the decision at the time that what I am saying, what I am going to say in this conversation, I need it to appear rational and reasonable to the people who are watching the discussion. Because the person I'm having the discussion with is not going to change their mind, but these younger cousins who I have a good relationship with might see something that I'm saying and it might resonate with them as spectators to the conversation. And I don't have evidence to prove that that is indeed what happened, but after that kind of heated exchange was over, then, that person and I did not talk anymore that evening, but I continued to conversate with those younger cousins, right? So that leads me to believe that, there's something there. And maybe if those younger cousins now have their mind opened, or they're thinking about something in a slightly different way than they were before, then like, hey, the purpose of the debate was accomplished. That's what the debate was for. And I engaged in that in a willful exchange because I knew that this was for the spectators. It was not for the person I was arguing with.
Mm. You know, something that would be interesting to try. I just thought of this while you were talking.
Okay.
Because you get sometimes where somebody just really wants an argument about whatever issue. Um, and yes, a lot of us will just walk away rather than engage in it. But the one thing I just wonder, I want to know if anybody has ever done this, because I just think it would be interesting, is say, okay, I will have this discussion with you, but let's argue the other person's side.
Mm,
You have to do my viewpoint, I will do yours.
right.
And
Interesting idea.
yeah, and I mean, I thought I was just thinking about this because I have a family member, a favorite family member, who will just argue a viewpoint that's directly opposite of his for the sake of the debate. And he's very good at it. And I enjoy it because he makes me think. You
Right.
know, he'll say things periodically. He'll just do a post on Facebook or something. And it makes me think. I don't see him as attacking me or, other people. I just see it as, let's present this viewpoint. And so I love that about it because he does. It makes me look at things from a different perspective. Um, and I think, what would happen then? Because there's several things. I think that would happen is one, you would find out, do they actually know your side? Or is it what their side has presented your side to be? And do you really know theirs?
Exactly.
But it also will show them how much you know about theirs. And if you've researched theirs and you do know so many parts of that side, what comes down to then. Um, and there's because I know abortion is an issue that is one I just avoid with several people in my family.
Hmm.
Because I cannot explain my side very well because they get very, very angry about the whole thought of it. And so they don't hear anything I want to say. And but I wonder how much can be achieved by, playing it like you would in a debate class where you're told what side you're supposed to argue.
I think it's a provocative idea, and more importantly, that is one of the points to really get across as well. To be an effective communicator, you have to have your own mind being flexible. You have to be willing to change your own mind, and that's an approach to understand with any conversation you're going to get into. That most people believe what they believe for what they think are good reasons. um Generally speaking, people are not like mustache twirling like, ooh, I'm an evil anti-abortionist and therefore I want to control women's reproduction. No, it's not like that. They are working with a different set of looking at the situation, of looking at the what they see as a societal ill than we are looking at it. So being able to have the flexibility of mind to understand from their perspective can also I mean, that's one of the most important ways to build up the relationship, to build up the exchange, the rapport of the exchange. Is like, I am willing to think about what are my sincere beliefs in ways that are contrary to those beliefs. I am willing to live with some cognitive dissonance as a result of this conversation. And, and I can resolve those things later, or throughout the course of the conversation, we can work to resolve that cognitive dissonance, whether it's in me or whether it's in you. And, and that's all part of forging that relationship and building that bond.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's funny with that discussion because at the time it happened, when my first child was born, my son, who came too early, lived for 2 weeks. Um, I was anti-abortion then. I was very TBM. I was all of those things. And it's very interesting to look back on all of that because if they hadn't been able to revive him, which they didn't think they would,
Mhm.
it would have been listed as an abortion,
Mhm.
plain and simple, because he had to come out or I was going to die. And I was within 12 hours of liver rupture there, and that will kill you.
Yeah.
um, and so that's something, and some people who have tried to have the discussion with me where it turned into these arguments. They're like, well, would you have aborted your daughter, or would, what is it, this, that, and all this. And at one point I just said, "Oh, that would have been what happened with my son if they hadn't revived him." And it
Mhm.
just froze the whole thing, but we still couldn't get anywhere. And I think for me, it's taken a while for me to figure out how to have a discussion about abortion with very anti-abortion people.
Right.
Um, but I've learned, especially through this LARPing, that Will taught me so much on that one. Oh my God,
Yes.
I'm so much better in the last 6 months because of that. But I've learned to remember that viewpoint because I used to hold that viewpoint. And and so the most recent discussion I had was with somebody who was actually just having a discussion with me. But I said, you can be pro-choice and anti-abortion. And they thought about it for a minute and they said, okay, that makes sense.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
says, I says, it's just let somebody make their own choices.
Hmm.
you know and so but yeah, and so these are, because I mean these are all big discussions that happen around the big elections, especially because
Of
it
course.
is such a political hot point. Republicans know if they just say I'm anti-abortion, even if they're not, even if they're paying for their mistresses to have them all the time, all that
Yeah.
shit, if as long as they say it, then every Republican sheep is going to vote for them because that's the point they look for. Are
Mhm.
you anti-abortion? Then I'll vote for you. And yeah. And so, these are the hot points. Do you believe trans people are not people? Okay, I'll vote for you. Do you believe, and so these are all things that, I mean, they are what's going to happen in their homes on Thanksgiving.
You bring up an interesting point that I want to hone in on too, that you used to be there
Yes.
and are not there anymore. So you came to, through life experiences, through learning things, through losing your faith, through a number of changes in your life and circumstances, you have found yourself on the complete opposite side of the political spectrum. And I think that it's considerably less rare for liberals to turn conservative than it is for conservatives to turn liberal. And there is a correlation with people who are educated being more liberal in general. And that is just as we get older, as we become more wise, as we learn more things, generally we become more progressive in overall. These are overall trends, right? That is, in this population level. This does not necessarily apply to individuals. But that is to say that, like, in some ways it seems like you're communicating almost with an advantage because it's like I have been where you are right now, you have not been where I am. So therefore, I can empathize with your position more. I can understand your position more because I used to have the same thoughts and feelings that you do about this thing. And I think that maybe that is the extent to which that is useful in one of these conversations is that, like, hey, I used to be there as well, and not saying it in a condescending, like, Bruce R. McConkie tone of, like, oh, well, I grew up, I learned, I studied more, and I became more enlightened. No, like approaching it from the idea of, like, there's more information out there, there are more perspectives out there, and I just allowed my mind to approach those perspectives because they are no longer considered taboo to me. And yeah, and that can be, I think, very, very useful. But I think that does kind of give you a leg up if you want to go with this approach of, like, hey, let's have the conversation, but I'm going to defend your point, you're going to defend my point. And because, like, you have entertained what they're coming from, you understand their arguments, you kind of understand generally where they come. Like, I grew up in a conservative family, but I never voted conservative, right? I never was generally like I was, like, by virtue of being raised in that household, I was conservative. But as I got older, I was like, no, like, no, we're all equal. Oh, wait, that's not, the Republicans don't think we're all equal. All right, well, fuck them. As like as I was, like, becoming teenage iconoclast Bryce, it was like, yeah, these guys are kind of assholes. I don't like them. But so, like, the path is different for everybody. So I've never truly been, like, deep in conservatism. I've never, like, I've lived inside of it, but I've never been, like, I've never understood it. I've never, like, my mind has never been in that space. So that could be like a hard exercise for me this coming weekend, visiting family. Like, all right, let's do it. But this time I'm gonna be the anti-baby killing person, and you have to be the pro-baby murdering person. Let's have this out. I like that idea.
Yeah. Because I think too, once you finish, to be able to ask the other side, did I present your side well?
Hmm.
And I think I could do that on a lot of these issues because, like I said, there was a point where I was like that, where I could present their side, but I'm curious if they could present mine
Hmm.
and to hear what you would say. But I also think that I mean, one of the reasons why I think this might be an interesting exercise to do is to hear somebody else try representing you to spout to you what they think you believe. And if you're saying things that they do believe, they might hear it differently than they do when they're talking to people who agree with them. I don't know if it would. I honestly don't, because I
Yeah.
just think it would be
What do you
interesting to
mean by
try.
that? I'm
Well, it's
yeah.
like, um, I mean, part of why I was thinking of this is because I once had a roommate in college. She had to prepare a debate for why Diary of Anne Frank should be um, banned from schools, and
Oh,
then
okay.
present the other side of the argument why it should not. And she had to answer all her own points. And so she was asking me to give her points for why it should be banned, which of course I didn't believe even then as a TBF. I've just never believed in banning books because I think books should be read, but that's also because that's what my parents did. So I was giving her all sorts of points because I've read the book several times and everything else. And then finally she's like, stop, because I don't know how to defend that. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I had to pull back a little bit more. But she was just like, I can't give an argument against it, or I can't, any of these kind of things. And so it was really an interesting experiment to me on that. And so that's why I was like, I wonder if the person would come out of it saying, oh, I just heard somebody who doesn't agree with me presenting something I have said, and I'm hearing how it sounds. I
Right,
don't know.
right.
I mean, they hear it themselves anyway in an echo chamber of everyone. And I don't know. I'm not sure if it would, but it would be interesting to see if it did.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Huh. So I don't want to I want to open up the discussion to our panelists here, but I also don't want to put them on the spot. So it looks like we have Julie and we have Joel here. So I'm curious if either of you are going to be spending Thanksgiving holidays with conservative family members, if this is a point of concern for you, and if you have any ideas or tips or thoughts about how to have those conversations, or if you just totally avoid them because fuck that, I'm not getting into it. Like, I get that as well. So either of you are welcome to chime in if you'd like as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna spend the holidays with family. I totally just avoid it because it'd be me against so many people. I just don't want to get into
Yeah.
it.
Totally understand
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that. I've avoided that for so long, and I've reached the point now, if they bring me into it, I do a little better, but I tend to just, okay, so how about those jazz? They're playing crappy this year, aren't they?
yeah. My
Uh,
bosses are a little bit more progressive, so that's
Right.
good because like it's kind of been fun when they'll like spar with their dad, my brother.
okay.
Like,
Oh,
but
good.
I usually just stay out of it
Right.
or just like leave the room.
Do they know your stance?
Mhm.
That's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that can be bad, but that's,
yeah,
but yeah, that makes it, I don't know if it makes it easier or harder for you. I
yeah,
kept mine private for a really long time. And then I started this podcast, didn't think about anything with that, with my own name or anything like that. And then I found out that a family member already listened to the podcast and was like, huh, sends me the link to my very first episode and said, I only read the Book of Mormon 10 times. And I was like, oh, shit.
Oh, family knows. Uh-oh.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I nearly had a heart attack that day. It was funny.
Hmm.
I was hyperventilating for a while and everything, but it's like, oh, okay. So, but yeah, that's just when it's like you got to be prepared for whatever might happen and the fallout from it all.
Right.
Um,
Well, and
yeah.
and Julie, like you're making a very good point as well of picking your battles too. If you are in a situation where it is you versus every other member of your family and you got no backup, why would you put yourself in that situation? Why would you want to opt into a conversation like that? For me, like I would. But that's just my personality. But I think for the vast majority of people, that is terrifying to just be the
yeah,
one person in a room, a circle of seats around you, and you're tasked with arguing against everybody, one person versus the whole world. That sounds like a fucking nightmare for a lot of people. So I get
Yeah.
that, Julie.
yeah. It is.
Yeah. I remember once Seth Andrews, the
The
what do you
thinking
call what?
atheist?
Thinking atheist. Thank
Yeah.
you. I was like, which one is he? There's like every single something atheist. There's a bunch
Yeah.
like that. Okay. Anyway, Seth Andrews, the man with the chocolate syrup voice, um, he told of once being at a family thing, and there was a new in-law there, I think, or something like that, and she was asking him what he does for a job, and he tended to keep it on the down low, anything with him. Then finally he just said, he's just thought, fuck it. And he's just said, I host one of the leading atheist podcasts, The Thinking Atheist. And she was like, oh, and then started asking questions. And it turned out to be a good conversation, but it's something that he tended to avoid because the family was very strongly Christian. He'd been a Christian radio host himself before realizing that none of it was true. So at any rate, I think it's such a tough balance because you also don't know when somebody asks you a direct question, you really don't know what directions it's going to go. And especially if it's a new family member, you don't know very well. Because I mean, with our siblings, we all can tell if they're trying to trigger you or not. We
Oh
all
yeah.
know it. Yeah, we know how to do it to each other. We know what buttons to push. We know how to do that. We all grew up together. That's what we do. But you might not know what's going to happen next on something, and so it's hard stepping out on a limb, hoping it's not going to break under you.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, with people who are unfamiliar, who you haven't had a duel with before, you don't know what moves they're going to deploy on you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And once again, that comes back to like picking your battles,
Yeah.
making sure that you're in a situation where it's fair, and that you're not being ganged up on, because that's it, if we talk about like having a conversation, having an argument with somebody, and as soon as the barriers come up, right? If you are engaging in an adversarial conversation with a whole bunch of other people and you are seen as the adversary to that entire group, nothing is getting through that barrier.
No.
Absolutely nothing you say is going to break through. There's no magic crafting of words. There's no progressive testimony golden bullet that's going to break down that wall and cause somebody to think differently. That's just not how it works.
Doesn't work that way. And it will be a group of chickens there, because when one is weaker, the others just peck them to death. And it's vicious as fuck. So that's what it'll be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we, once again, we're pack animals, right? And like when especially if we see somebody from our camp getting beat up on, we're going to circle the wagons around that person.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of right, wrong, truth, non-truth, it doesn't matter. We're going to rally around a person from our side, from our community. So yeah. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, I did watch a couple of TEDx talks about communicating with family members, and just some overall high-level ideas about how to engage in these conversations, and put together a few prompts for that. So we can go through that if we want, or we can continue more of the panel discussion. Just kind of whatever we want to do at this point.
Right, right. Well, I also think back to the old missionary guides that we had when I was out on a mission. They don't have these anymore, which I think is probably not a good idea because it went through on how you get your investigators to listen to you. And there are things like find common ground, build a relationship of trust. And I was like, these are just really good things to take into account when you are getting into a new relationship with somebody. And so going into these, building on common ground. I mean, one of those things that was talked about is that you see things from their perspective, which is part of that argument idea I had, the debate idea, which is argue their perspective. But to see it from their perspective is important, because then you are saying you have a legitimate perspective, just like I do. It's like when I was talking to these two friends of mine about the temple thing. I saw it completely from their perspective and said, yeah, this is bad. They should be respectful in this area. And so for them, it was much easier to hear anything I said, knowing I co-host an anti-Mormon podcast. For me, they felt like I understood it and would be respectful to them. And so I think that is one of the big things, is people want to know they're heard and understood. And I'm fine with somebody disagreeing with me as long as they understand my perspective. And so I think that's
Yeah.
a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that is, I mean, building, because when you're talking with a friend or a family member, right, there's all of the old relationships, all the old interactions that are feeding into whatever interaction you're about to have. But there's also like the established universe of that specific conversation. And regardless of like past history and everything, it's important to build up that trust within the established conversation such that people are willing to have open ears. People are willing to entertain an alternative perspective. And, and given conversations with family members, or long time friends, that can make it much easier or much harder to establish that trust within that conversation. If you've had many adversarial exchanges with that person, then it's highly unlikely that you'll be able to build that trust, establish that communication, that throughput, that two-way street of communication. That's really the important point, is that you're communicating equally with each other and equally understanding each other's points. It can be a lot harder when you've had argument after argument at every single Christmas and Thanksgiving with the same person. But on the other hand, right, if you are a longtime friend or a family member who you've never had a conversation like this with, then you're starting with more of a clean slate, and you can build up that trust and build up that two-way communication street. I think easier, and be able to kind of live within that established conversation, and agree and have more two-way communication.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's all to say that it's never easy to make the to make the judgment call of to get into the conversation or not. It's never an easy choice, but it's one that you have to premeditate.
Yeah. Well,
It's
I'm
hard to
also,
get.
oh, go ahead, Julie. Go.
Yeah, it's hard nowadays because you have to start like with very basic truths. Like vaccines are good.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
okay.
This is how tariffs work. Yeah.
Yeah. Real precisely. Yeah.
Of course, I've found that when it's those where they just can't help arguing on it, it's because I just can't help it. I tend to go, oh, you know what they used to do in the Regency era? It's so weird. Da, 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 and I just switch it. I'm like, yeah, this is because of this thing. Oh
Yeah.
my God. So it's like I was doing that a lot with the Jekyll and Hyde stuff that I did in that episode on that, because I had all of that I looked into. And so it was like just the other day, it was at cardiac rehab actually this week, and things were turning a little bit ugly with some of the patients in there. And so I was like, did you know that? Because we managed to get it there. It wasn't anything political or anything. It was having to do with books and authors and everything. And I was like, did you know that Robert Louis Stevenson has parks named for him all over the world? It's like, it's the coolest thing ever. This thing, da, 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 and I started. And they're like, didn't he write Treasure Island? I'm like, yeah, and he also wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And then I went on from there. It was super funny, but it's like diverting it onto something really interesting. That's my, well, at least that's interesting to me, that I get excited about. That's kind of my defense mechanism of choice.
Mhm.
When it's this kind of a combative relation, the combative discussion that starts happening. And so, because when I feel like we can't get anywhere, so I, anything remotely related to the Regency era, I can usually divert onto.
That's a good technique, changing the subject.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, that's really one of the best ones, because they do say just walk away from it
Mhm.
if you have to. And sometimes that's really all you can do. Yeah.
Right. Or, I mean, even using that as, like a jump off point to channel the negative energy, the argumentative energy into something into like, oh, hey, well, let's talk about something that is different, a different topic. that can work to cause people to kind of forget what was going on in the conversation and what was so adversarial before, because now everybody in the conversation is focused on a hypothetical world, a world that doesn't exist. They're focusing on a past generation of life and what it was like back then. And you are establishing that universe, right? You are tailoring, you're weaving together the world that they are seeing. And in ways, like, you can also use that to like make social commentary, right?
Mhm.
It's like, if we get into discussions of religion, I'm speaking with family, I very, very, very rarely talk about the church. I will occasionally divert on to talking about another religion in the way that they do things, or using those things as analogs to talk about early church history. But very rarely do I hit the topic square on, because I know that it's a minefield, right?
Mhm.
There's nobody is safe treading out into these waters. So that is all to say that, like, using tactics of diversion, tactics of getting people, unaffixed from whatever the argumentation is, and onto a different way of thinking, onto a different subject, can be a very good way to either pull away from the conversation, or to get the conversation to no longer be an argument, to completely change it, or to illustrate your point by using an analog from history or from fantasy or from whatever. I read a really interesting book. It was written by this guy Orwell. He made some really, really interesting points that I think we should discuss, right? So diverting, changing the topic, using literature, using history to understand the litany of factors that are going on in today's conversations. I think that's another very helpful tactic to use as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Another mic.
also,
Oh
and
yeah, go.
also just diverting to throw a fucking smoke bomb and extract as quick as you can. Like, that's
I
useful
know.
too.
One of my ways too is to just say, so what are you doing for fun these days?
There you go.
And that tends to change their mindset, because then it's like, oh, I can talk about myself for a minute. Because all of us, most of us are really good at talking about ourselves.
Mhm.
I mean, if the conversation is lagging, I will always bring up anything of what I'm reading. Um, but that, we're good at that. And so that's another thing is, if you're going to change the subject, change it to something they are interested in, because it will diffuse a hateful situation that way.
Mhm.
But you can't be heavy-handed about it. You've got to actually care. And if they're family members who know you, they will know if you care.
Right. Right.
They will see it as sarcasm if they think you don't care. And so,
Uh,
and they'll
there's
be like,
a
oh,
there's this talk that you actually told me about, by Heath Enright, at the Kentucky Free Thought, and it was what, 2021, I think, that the talk was given.
I think so.
But it made me chuckle. One of the lines that Heath said in there, he's like, "And you got to finesse it," and I'm going to use that word a lot, finesse. You got to finesse your idea into the conversation, and that really is what it comes down to, is like being able to finesse in a conversation and
Yeah.
not be blunt or ham-fisted about it.
Mhm.
And that's a learned skill. That is not something that is easy to do. You just pick up and
Mhm.
say, "Well, I'm just going to be finessing with my conversation." No, no, no. You got to practice it.
Yeah, you do. Well, it's like that conversation, once again, back to the one I started with, about with the couple about the missionaries of the empty at the temple, is the point I was happy to be able to make, that I made at the point I wanted to make, is they're too young.
Right.
They are too young. They shouldn't be going out that young. I didn't say they shouldn't be going out this young, because then it's criticizing the prophet and all that shit, and then they're going to shut down. It was, they're really young. I think that's one of the problems with lowering the age, is they're still high school mentality. And they heard it and understood it. And so, all after showing respect to their voice, to their position, and giving them alternatives, or giving them, ways to work with this, and how to handle it, because there was a lot of it with me doing that, saying you should also ask, how should you deal with it when it happens again, because it will, because they're young. And so, that was one thing I was really happy how it went.
Right. Right. Well, and this is something that I can share from my experience as well. If you are able to set yourself up as a respectful interlocutor, then the person is going to be more likely to vocalize something in their mind to you. Because, like, look, I mean, I think generally speaking, people who are in whatever camp, if we're talking politics, we're talking religion, whatever, they they see problems in their camp, but they will never admit to those problems to an outsider of the camp. But someone who is a fellow insider of the camp, they can talk about grievances, about problems, about disagreements that they may have with leadership or whatever the case may be, right? So if you can establish yourself as a trusted outsider, then there that is likely that someone who is on the other side of a divide will come to you with a concern or will talk to you openly about something that you think that they might not talk about. And I can share my own personal perspective on this. In recently having a talk with a family member who's an older conservative, born and raised in the church and whatnot. They vocalized with me their almost flippant disregard for Rusty Nelson and the whole anti-Mormon thing, and wins for Satan. And they were just kind of laughing about it, like, it was never this way when I was a kid. We embraced the term, so I don't really get what Russell M. Nelson is on about. And it was interesting because they brought it up almost apropos of nothing. It was just kind of we were just kind of gallivanting around, and the conversation just kind of took that turn apropos of nothing, and I was a little surprised by it. And it's like, if you trust me enough to have this conversation and to vocalize insider disagreements with someone who is an outsider, then that shows that you trust me to have that conversation and that I'm not going to use that. Like, you admitted that there's a flaw, that you don't think that I'm going to now use that as a point of leverage against you. And I think that's really where it comes from, as a survival mechanism. If you admit that there's fault to an outsider, then that represents a chink in your armor. Somebody is going to then attack that weakness, and you don't want to put out anything that is going to be perceived as weakness because you don't want to open yourself up to that attack. But once again, that's looking at it in the adversarial context. If you are having conversations that are non-adversarial, then opening up about disagreements in whatever your camp is can be a good way to build that communication. Like, hey, look, the D party is out of touch with younger generations. They don't have a cohesive policy on Gaza and Israel, and that, admitting that there are flaws in the Democratic Party can allow, if you're willing to take a couple of punches, it can allow someone who is on the other side to say, oh yeah, and they do this and they do this and they do this, and if you can take a few of those punches, then suddenly they can see that, oh, you are someone who is building up some trust. You are sharing insider grievances with an outsider. And that's not something that happens in an adversarial conversation. So
Mm-mm.
building trust, once again, building up rapport, building up trust, and having, and it once again goes back to what Will talks about, LARPing. You're LARPing for this. It doesn't matter if you are, if what they say is causing you to have an anger response. If you can absorb that and take a deep breath and say, okay, so yeah, I mean, I understand, and let's talk about that, right? Then that is going to be, you're engaging in the LARP. You are role playing with them for the purposes of, let's live in this established universe for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So we also have Joel on the panel. I don't want to put you two on the spot, Joel. I know we haven't heard from you at all, but if you would like to chime in at any point,
Hi.
just say something, and yeah, do you have any thoughts on the conversation up to this point?
Just reminded me of my interaction with my dad last
Okay.
time. I last time I talked to him, it didn't go very well.
Oh
Um,
no.
and he's probably like the only conservative Mormon in my family right now. And yeah, he came in and visit me in and he let me and he I wanted to turn on my camera, but I don't know how.
Okay.
Okay,
We're having an
never mind.
OBS error, it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
Well, yeah, it didn't go very well. He would bring up things that he saw on like a Mormon podcasts, like those like Cardenas and
Oh,
Quaker kind
the
of
Ward radio.
podcasts. Yeah, or radio, and
Yeah.
yeah, he likes those kind of things, and he would like yeah, he brought some something that that was spoken there, and I responded to him with things that Dan Vogel said, and then and he got kind of get kind of got mad, and he got frustrated, and he's like, "Oh, you're just listening to like anti-Mormon, like YouTube and stuff," and it didn't go very well.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the invocation of the word anti-Mormon
Hmm.
illustrates that the wall was built, the barrier was built, right? Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious, reflecting on the conversation, how do you think it could have gone differently? Is there anything that your dad could have done or anything that you could have done that might have changed the outcome?
I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
that's a
hard
rough
question.
one. It is.
It's yeah, it's a very hard question, especially like thinking retrospectively, and I'm sure it's also been one of those things where there's been plenty of like shower conversation with you, or like, oh, I wish I would have said that. Oh, I could have had him if I said that, right? So
Yeah,
that makes
yeah,
it even harder.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, those are rough too, because you also have that whole parent-child relationship and
Mhm.
everything else too coming into it. Yeah, those are rough. I understand that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I presume that this it's not just Mormon stuff too. And it's an entire package of beliefs in so many cases when it comes to religious tradition or conservative tradition. There's very little lines between the two. So yeah, I understand.
Mm,
It can be very, very hard because it's like if you start trying to tackle one aspect of that entire ecosystem of beliefs, then a person can see that as an attack on the entire belief structure.
yeah.
Like, no, oh, you're reading anti-Mormon literature, you're listening to anti-Mormon podcasts. Like, no, I was literally just answering one thing that you were talking about. I'm not trying to undermine everything that you believe, everything that exists. No, no, like just that just makes it so much harder that it's either it's a package deal. You either get everything or everything is all false. And to get someone to think about it in a way that, oh, it's all false, then that's a much harder proposition.
Yes.
yeah, yeah. It's always hard. Talked to him a few times. When I left the church, we had a conversation, and ever since I left the church, like it never goes well with my dad
Mm,
because he's like my sister, younger sister. She's still a believing LDS, but she's like more liberal, and we'll get along, and we could have like conversation about pretty much anything. But with my dad, he's like very like orthodox, believing, conservative, Mormon. So yeah, it's been hard.
does he see it as an insult to himself that you left?
Um, yeah, I think so. I think he mentioned something like that. I think he's like, uh, yeah, I, because in my dad's line, it's like seventh generation Mormon, so it's like it's, yeah, yeah, so I think he has like a huge pride in that.
Right, right. That
Hmm.
makes sense. Because is also, especially his generation, we're taught that if your children leave, it means you were a
Hmm.
failure. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
oh, ouch. And it's hard because there's really no way for you to help him get through that.
Hmm.
I mean, the only way you can is if you were to fake going back, but
Hmm.
that's not a good way of dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, that is hard. That's really hard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, my mom stopped going to church. They got divorced, and my brother was my younger brother was never like super active, so I was like the only one that went on the mission, became a high priest, and
Mm,
was and did everything. So I think he had a higher expectation on me. Mhm.
right. Right.
Are you also
Oh,
the oldest?
I'm the oldest, yeah.
Yeah,
oh,
so that's,
oh, that too.
firstborn, oldest, son,
Everything.
mission. Yeah, that's a lot of things. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh man, that's a lot for you to have to carry. How long have you been out?
Um, right when coronavirus hit,
Okay.
so
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
few years now. Mm.
Okay.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah. It's just not, it's not easy, right? It's not easy
Mm.
to deal with these things.
Mm.
And once again, that goes to what we were talking about earlier, that like it can, when you're trying to engage in these adversarial conversations with family members, that can be one of the hardest ones to navigate because you're bringing in all of the old, everything from every past interaction, from the upbringing, from everything into that conversation. There's no way to disassociate your past history with each other and just have that conversation stand alone. It's impossible to do that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's
Wow.
tough.
Mm. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm
It's
sorry, Joel.
We'll be surrogate parents. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Uh,
That's why I'm registered with Free Mom Hugs because I'm like, I'll give hugs as a mom to anybody. Yeah.
mhm.
No, I totally understand.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I,
hard.
I want to pick up on kind of part of the interaction this last little exchange too, that it's impossible for you to go back to just believing and accepting and going to church and everything. And
Mhm.
I think that that is one of the important things to establish in a conversation like this is not lying. There can't be any shred of dishonesty happening, or that's immediately going to cause distrust. It's going to cause the barriers to come up, right?
Yeah.
So even if you're LARPing, right, and like engaging in like, oh, this is the established universe, you don't go on to say, well, I'm LARPing, therefore I believe that the church is true. You're not lying about it. You're LARPing that I'm going to pretend as if I believe that the church is true in order to have this conversation. That's the inner monologue, right? But like being authentic is an important part to building up that trust. And if there's a detection of a lie, or if a lie happens that someone knows is not true, or if you embrace something that you genuinely do not believe in, and speak about it like you are truthfully embracing it, then that can cause a fracture of distrust to happen. And that I think that's probably the wrong way to go about this.
Yeah.
And that's where you might deploy a tactic like you're talking about, Shannon, of like, hey, just for the sake of fun, why don't you argue my point? I'll argue yours, right? And that's mutually engaging in the play, in the pretend, in the lie. That's both of you saying, all right, let's suspend reality for a second. Let's lie to each other, and that's building up trust. And both people knowing that we're acting, we're playing, we're role playing in this right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I want somebody to do it and then tell me about it. I will not be spending Thanksgiving with anybody I have to worry about that with. And so it's not a discussion that will happen there. But I'm just like, I want somebody to do it and then tell me if it worked or how it worked or how it all went.
Mhm.
So please somebody do.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I want to go through a couple of these overall points that I drew from a number of different sources, just kind of poking and prodding at this. And most of these are things that like we've kind of hit on either directly or ancillarily just up to this point. But I think just laying them out there in bullet points might help us a little bit. One of the points is that you don't argue to win, you instead communicate to understand. And that's an important part of all of this, is that like you're not here to win points on the debate score sheet. You are here to build a line of communication, a two-way street of communication.
Yeah.
And I just saw Julie unmute. Did you want to chime in there as well?
Yeah, if you recognize that you're probably not going to change their mind, that's a good way to start it. Then you want to understand them.
That's a good point.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's actually a good way to build into, or to try and get onto their level. And that is either asking them about something that is a pressure for them, or talking about something that you know is a pressure for them. And a great way to get somebody super engaged is to talk about their wallets. Talk about things that are worrying people, and it's usually how to pay the bills. It's usually the price of groceries, the price of fuel, the price of everything. And that is so much, we saw so much of what motivated this last election cycle was the price of goods, inflation, right? So if you can talk to somebody and communicate to somebody on their level about something that is a constant pressure in their life, money, then it's going to show that, oh, I understand where you're coming from. Oh, look, I don't like paying these high prices for groceries either when my wages are stagnant. And you know, like playing in that world of like, hey, this is an established truth. The middle class is vanishing. More people have less money than ever before, and the wealth gap is bigger than it has ever been. These are generally bad things, right? We can agree that these are generally bad things. And coming to an agreement, an established rule that, like, one of the rules of this conversation is that wealth inequality is not a good thing, or groceries are too expensive. And creating that resonance and creating that line of trust and communication and mutual suffering, commiseration, is something that I think a lot of people can begin to have their mind opened up with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And look, and if we want to you know, kind of hit this topic kind of the nail on the head with it, saying that, like, you know, I did not vote for Trump because I can't afford a Trump presidency. I can't afford a 50% or 100% tariff on everything. I'm already just barely scraping by. I can't afford doubling the price of everything that's manufactured in China. I can't afford these things, so I can't afford a Trump presidency. And that can be retorted with, well, you know, I couldn't afford the last 4 years under the Biden administration, the Biden presidency, so I can't afford 4 more years of that. We have to do something different. So suddenly we have a mutual shared suffering. There's not enough money. And we can begin to build a conversation from that breaking off point, that jump off point.
I, of course, bring it up as insurance.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, that is a huge issue because the Republican side wants to destroy Obamacare because Obama, and the Democratic side is like, everyone needs him insurance. And I do that because it also gives a face to people, because they're like, oh, Shannon will be without insurance. Shannon's medications would cost her $6,000 a month if she had to pay for them herself.
Yeah.
Shannon would not live without insurance.
Yeah.
Oh, that suddenly becomes personal. And so,
Well,
yeah,
and medical bills, that's a shared suffering,
it
right?
is.
We all have medical bills, whether it's going for a routine checkup or, you know, going through life-threatening complications like Shannon has gone through this past year and a half, 2 years, almost 2 years now. My God,
Yeah.
wow. What a shit 2 years.
Yep.
The mutual suffering of having to deal with insurance, having to pay high premiums, having to get a letter in the mail from the hospital that it's like, you know, your operation was $45,000. Insurance covered 44,000 of it. So how good is insurance?
Yeah,
It's yeah, like that's a point of shared suffering as well.
it really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the other thing it's done too is I was able to explain to people how insurance actually works. And to say, you know, this is what happens. Everybody pays in, then money is taken from this pot to pay out. So I says they proportionally need to have at least 80% of people on insurance not needing hardly anything all year so they can pay for the rest of us who need, you know, $10,000 a month on
Mm-hmm.
our medical needs. And it's like explaining that to people is something I have done since Obamacare started.
Yeah.
Because, that I was saying, if you're going to give insurance to everybody, you have to require everyone to have it, or every insurance company is going to go bankrupt. And so that was one thing I really liked being able to do. Or it's like understanding tariffs now and how that even works to people, because then they realize that what they want with paying less on things is not going to happen under Trump because of what he
Mm-hmm.
wants to do with the tariffs. And, finding this is directly opposite, all that kind of stuff. And so being able to explain how it actually works without being combative about it.
Yeah,
And
being actually informed. So
right.
they say, what? Trump said that? What? Do you have evidence he said that? You could give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's some who are just not going to listen to you. It's like when I was explaining how Obamacare worked to an aunt of mine who was so anti-Obama, it was ridiculous. um, Completely anti. I mean, she couldn't listen to a word on his side. And I was explaining it. She's like, no, 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 this person told me everything. And they researched it all. And I says, no, they didn't, because they don't understand how insurance works. And I was explaining everything to her. And I was like, no. And she says, well, it doesn't work. And I says, it doesn't work the way Obama wanted it to, which he fully says. She's like, no, he's never said that. I was like, yes, he has. I've seen video of it. And I showed her the video. But it's like, and I went through and I was saying the reason why it's not working is because this guy made sure something went through Congress to make sure it was taken out so that it doesn't work as well as it did, as it was intended.
Yeah.
And this thing got shaved off, and this thing got shaved off. And then she's naming off all this stuff. And I was like, actually, that's not in Obamacare. That's in the Patriot Act. And then, and it was this crazy conversation. And I don't know. I did present things, and she was very upset with me at the end because I was showing her, and I was actually showing her the various things that were where she was wrong. And she didn't like that, was not happy with me about it. And I don't know if there was any other way to do it, because she was so adamant that anything that came out of Obama's mouth was from the devil, and that he was from the devil. And so therefore, and so it was a tough conversation. But I look back on it and I think, no, it needed to be had. So I don't
Yeah.
know if I don't think I really achieved anything with her, but she did hear it and see what I had to say. And so I don't know. I still, to this day, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but it's,
Well, and
yeah.
it's also one of those cases too where like you may be and this is part of like making the calculation of do I engage in this conversation or not. It could also be the case that you having an adversarial, a combative conversation can crack someone's armor, that you may not have had a direct impact that caused them to change their mind. But what you did is create a hole where somebody later can introduce an idea, or someone that they trust more than they trust you in that conversation. Someone later down the line can inject some ideas into that fracture and say, oh, well, hey, well, that's going to cause that person to remember back to the conversation they had with you and say, oh, maybe I was wrong about that, or something like that, right?
Right.
It's cumulative effect. Like you having a conversation with someone can be a cumulative effect of having multiple conversations with that person, or it can be that one exchange and then later on down the line they continue having more conversations with people they disagree with, that can cause them to have a slower burn coming to terms with information.
Yeah.
And that's actually another point that I want to bring up too, is like introducing thought exercises in order to build communication and working cooperatively, right? So instead of saying Obamacare versus private insurance, or Medicare for all versus a healthcare exchange, or people being able to shop for their preferred healthcare, instead framing it as a thought exercise of something that is agreed upon by most people that should not exist. Saying, hey, Under our current medical system, we are the only industrialized country that has medical bankruptcies. So, what are medical bankruptcies? How do they happen? And is there some solution that we can work together to come up with that would solve the problem of medical bankruptcies, would make it so medical bankruptcy no longer happens? And also introducing the idea of like insurance. Like, what is insurance for? Insurance is to guard against anomalies, to guard against acts of God, as they are termed in so many insurance policies. A tree falls on your house, you have insurance to guard against that. Insurance is not a good system to resolve inevitabilities, right? Inevitably, we're all going to need to withdraw from the medical care system, especially end of life care is extremely, extremely expensive. So insurance is really good at guarding against anomalous things that happen. But when everybody is eventually going to have to take out of the insurance policy more than they are putting in, then that is a system that is designed to cause people to go bankrupt. That is a system that is not designed very well. So how we see the social ill of medical bankruptcies? How do we solve this problem? And working together, and people I think are more willing to have a conversation if they feel like they're engaging in a cooperative building game instead of an adversarial debate. Julia, I see you're unmuted again. You want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think or like telling your experience of what you had to go through. Or like, hey, I'm on Obamacare myself. Trump's election probably make me not have health care anymore. Do we really want, what do you think about that? Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
yeah.
now you saying like, hey, so I know that you're worried about the price of groceries right now. I am not going to be able to afford to have health insurance. So that means that I'm going to have to make the decision with my health as part of my budget. Like, do I get medications this month or do I get groceries this month? I'm going to have to make a choice either or on that. And that's going to lead to worse overall health outcomes. That's going to lead to more people dying from preventable causes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my medicine like maybe like $1,000 per month. So
Yeah. And if you suddenly had to pay out of pocket for all of those, then that's $1,000 a month that you are no longer putting into the economy in any other way, right? And that's a point to get across as well, right? Like when people are spending all of their money on bills, that is terrible for the economy. They're not buying service goods. They are not going to shows. They're not going out to eat. They are not injecting their hard-earned money back into the economy. They are just funneling all of their money to three large companies that are taking all of that and just laughing their asses to the bank, right? That's bad for the economy. And even just looking at it as a population level, I think can cause people to have a different experience too of like what is best for the economy? Not having a whole bunch of people who are unable to pay their bills. That when you have people defaulting on their bills, enough of those leads to an entire country defaulting on its bills. That's a bad thing. That's an overall bad thing. And we can talk about how this is bad for everybody and how insurance is designed to slowly take all money from everybody, as many people as it can, and put it into a single fund. Right. And the idea, of course, is, that eventually those people will have to draw out from that. But that also leads to, when you have a massive pooling of these resources, it also leads to hyperinflation in the sectors where these resources are pooled. So, medical procedures here are more expensive than everywhere else on the planet. Oh, we have the best medical care in America and in the entire world. No, we don't. We literally don't. By every objective standard of metric, by infant mortality rates, by end of life care rates, by all standards of measurement, America healthcare system is one of the least healthy healthcare systems of all industrialized countries. How do we resolve those things? And making it a cooperative game of like, this is a social ill. How do we solve this? How do we make life better for more people? How do we get people interested in the economy? And how do we make the economy better than it currently is? Reducing the amount of medical debt that's out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
collaboration instead of adversarial. That helps a
Yeah,
bunch too.
it absolutely does. Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of other points I have listed here is anytime that rhetoric comes out, do anything necessary to get away from rhetoric from either side. And that's it comes from a familiarity of like dealing with people on an opposite side of something, recognizing when they are deploying rhetoric and absorbing that and being like, oh no, I'm not gonna give you what that rhetoric was designed to do. I'm not going to give you an inflammatory response because the rhetoric was designed to get a rise out of me. So recognizing when rhetoric is deployed against you, absorbing that and not throwing rhetoric back, because that's what rhetoric is designed to do. One person throws a joust, the other person exchanges with a jab, and it goes back and forth. But if we can the longer we stay away from rhetoric, the more work that can, I think, be accomplished in any of these conversations. And that's a good thing.
That's usually when I jump in with like, you know what? It happened in 1885. It was so weird. Da, 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 da. It's
Like,
it's the funnest thing to do. It seriously
Yeah.
is. Because it's like they stumble forward like, oh, wait, what? That just took a weird direction. And I'm like, yeah, let's have some fun.
Yeah.
I
You know
was
the way that
reading up on this.
you know the way that Watson is portrayed in media is not accurate according to the book. Watson was
Not
actually really, really smart. He's not this bumbling idiot that's just a sidekick.
That's one thing I liked about this series as opposed to that series is because
Yeah.
of this. Yeah. It's just I seriously love doing that because it's so funny to watch it because when they're just trying so hard to start a fight and you just refuse.
Yeah.
And it's just fun to frustrate it with that.
Hmm. Or
Oh my God.
there's another, I think, even more subversive way you approach this too, is that like when you catch rhetoric, when rhetoric is thrown at you, forcing someone to explain that rhetoric.
Mhm.
Oh, well, women just want to be able to have abortions so that they can have sex with whoever they want on the weekends and then whatever, right? Whatever that rhetoric is. Like,
Yeah.
okay, explain that to me.
Yeah.
Explain your point of rhetoric. And are there outside cases where that rhetoric doesn't apply? In which
what
case,
about
is this
married
rhetoric
women?
actually? Oh, sorry. Say that
Yeah.
again.
What about married women? Do you think they
Right.
would be more likely to get pregnant
Right.
Yeah,
than
exactly.
single person?
I've done
Bingo.
that with
Uh,
people arguing about late term abortions
Hmm.
because I'm like, nobody chooses to just randomly have a late term abortion. You don't go that long being pregnant. At that point, you are having one because you're going to die if you don't.
Yeah.
So explain to me
Or
how this is a problem.
your life circumstances change such that it would be more harm to that child to
Hmm.
carry them to full term than it would be for them to be aborted.
Yeah. And it's like I can come from the viewpoint, and this is where it's sort of cut their legs out from under them because I'm like, I mean, this is basically what would have happened with my son is if he hadn't been revived, he would have been an abortion. And I said, if knowing he couldn't have been revived, would I still have done it? Yes, because I didn't want to die. So this is where I'm coming from on this. I was like, they're not going to suddenly abort a baby a week before they're due. You just have the baby born. That's all. So explain to me this. And there's a lot with that they can't. But also I will come at it with why on ectopic pregnancies? Why on this? Do you know what this is? Why are you saying no abortions if it means this will happen? An 11-year-old little girl was pregnant because she was raped. Why force her to give birth? All of that just, and yeah. And that's when with the rhetoric of it, I tend to have do that to have them explain why and why they agree with that and when would it be wrong? Because I'm like, even the Mormon church said and it was in the bishop's handbook that abortions were okay in cases of incest, in cases of rape, or where the life of the mother was at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a personal decision, and the bishop wasn't supposed to be part of it.
Right.
He could counsel them, but he wasn't supposed to be part of the decision. And so it's like, okay, where is your viewpoint coming from? You know?
Well, and even entertaining their viewpoint. And Shannon, you kind of are in a situation where you are able to make this personal.
Yeah.
But like say, okay, so let's grant your rhetoric. Let's grant that society is what you're like. Let's move society in a hypothetical world to the extreme version of the rhetoric that you think is true right now. And what does that lead to? It leads to criminalization of abortions. It leads to, women who have an abortion, people with uteruses who have abortions being labeled as murderers for these things. You are of the situation where, medically speaking, had your son not survived, you would that procedure would have been classified as an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, Shannon Grover would be classified as a murderer.
Yes.
You would have to stand trial for your body aborting your child.
Right.
Is that society? Is that a society
exactly.
that we want to live in?
Exactly. And I've even brought up the point of, if this was happening today, I wouldn't have been allowed to give birth to him. You know, if it with this whole thing with abortions, because they didn't think they could revive him then. And so the doctors would have said, no, this would be called an abortion, not a birth. Therefore, we can't do anything.
Right.
If it was completely illegal. So therefore, I would have been forced to die.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, this is what you're telling me you want to have happened with me.
Mm-hmm.
How do you justify that? So yeah.
Oh, and God. that personal touch, I think, brings the rhetoric, changes the rhetoric from rhetoric into a personal application, a personal story. If we live in the world that you're envisioning right now, I'm not here anymore. You went to my funeral 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you want to live in that world?
And you could read them the church handbook and say, hey, they're a lot more progressive now than what things are going to. The way things are going, like
that's true.
Yeah. That's weird.
That's such a strange thought. That's
that
so
is
frightening.
That the church is more progressive than society.
Oh my God.
Yes. Ugh, that's weird. Yeah.
Okay. It's a freaky thought on that. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah, that's and the other thing I've gotten into is, I'm like, I think it'd be great to prevent abortions. And you want to know how? I'll tell you how. The best way possible to prevent them. I says, outlawing them will not prevent them. It just makes them illegal. People will still do them, and they'll be much more dangerous. We'll have far more deaths. The best way, absolute best way to prevent abortions: proper sexual education, proper contraceptives. The kids need to know what sex is. And teaching abstinence only is the wrong way to go about it, because the ones who want to have sex are going to have sex regardless of what you teach them. But if you teach them how to have safe sex, then it's a lot better. You have fewer disease, you have fewer abortions, needs for fewer teenage pregnancies. But two, if they all know how to have sex, you will prevent ones from having it who don't understand what's happening. Exactly. That'll be big. Like, this happens. You will prevent predators from telling a girl, if you're standing up and bent over, it's not sex. It's only sex if you're laying down. It's only sex if this. Girls are told that even today when they're taught abstinence only and when they're given no information. It's stupid. And I bring in the Regency era on that as well, because I'm like, they were kept intentionally naive and became prey to predators very, very easily. And then they were blamed for it, just like they are today. The fault is with those teaching this to them. And so, yeah, that's one of those things. And I bring up, the contraceptives, making sure those are available, easily available to everybody. Vasectomies. vasectomies will do a huge amount of
Men
preventing.
involved in the process have them
Exactly.
effective to see.
If
Yes.
men want to stop abortions, they need to get vasectomies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, those kind of things. And so, there's a lot of that I brought up, and I'm like, proper education. Education is the hugest thing to prevent problematic things.
Right.
So
Well, and
give that.
like to synthesize a bunch of elements of our conversation. Yeah. Oh, so you don't like abortions? All right. Well, why don't we talk about Wickham? Because he was a real son of a
I
bitch.
do that.
But why don't we also talk about the world in which Wickham lived, where he was allowed to do all of that shit
Yeah.
and
And
be
no
an
one blamed him
abuser,
for it.
and no one blamed him for it. Nobody called him
Mhm.
out on his shit. He was
Yeah.
never held accountable. And anytime that he was almost held accountable, his rich best friend came in and bailed him the fuck out of the situation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can we talk
He
about the
just got
problems in
married
this?
again. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have so much fun with that. Or I'll bring up Willoughby in Sense and Sensibility. He's even better on that one. But yeah, it's
Oh, it was Willoughby that just got married to get wasn't with.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, and Willoughby, he impregnated the girl and then left her high and dry, and then goes off and is with Mary, wanting to marry Marianne. But then when his the woman who was going to leave everything to him, when she found out about what he'd done to the young girl and everything, then she cut him off and was like, "Nope, you're not getting anything." And so he's like,
I
"Damn,
can't be
now I
with
got to
Mary.
marry an heiress
Yeah, I
because
can't marry Marianne now because she's poor,
yeah,
so I have to leave her high and dry.
yeah." So he did, and then he's like, "I still love her best," and blah blah blah. And it's like, "Oh, shut the fuck up." Yeah, yeah. The charming rake.
Yeah.
They've got a charming rake in every one of Jane
Yep.
Austen's books.
Yeah, you need to read Sense and Sensibility next, Bryce.
I
You
think I do.
should.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Watch the movie.
Yep. Yep.
It's really good.
Yeah.
I'll tell
Okay.
you which movie to watch too.
Yeah.
And really, there's a Pride and Prejudice one you should watch, but it's a 6-hour miniseries.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to tell you watch Keira Knightley one because it's not, there's so many flaws. It's so many flaws to that.
Okay. Well,
God,
I
so
take your
many.
recommendations for the best of the best, and
Yes.
I've yet to see you miss. So
Bingley would not have been walking into Jane's bedroom. Good fucking God. Okay.
All right.
It irritated the hell out of me. Anyway, yep. Okay. And the clothing is wrong. And everything. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Elizabeth wouldn't be wearing what she was wearing.
No,
That's okay.
no. And everything. I don't mind the messy hair. That's fine. Everybody had
Yeah.
messy hair then. There's a lot of people complain about that. Anyway, okay. All right. Onwards.
Oh dear. Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, so those were kind of all the suggestions that I was able to pull, what we've discussed so far, and then, just my bullet points that I had. That's kind of what I am trying to approach this Thanksgiving with. And we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Mhm.
I may try to do what you suggest, Shannon, of like, why don't you argue my point, I'll argue yours, and see if what happens with that. That could actually be a bit of fun, a way
Yes.
to have some fun in these adversarial conversations.
Well, and I think too, if you're proving that you actually do know more about their point, their side, than they think you do, you might be able to prove to them they know less about your side than they think they do.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely.
would be an interesting thing too. Yeah.
Right.
They could just do like a caricature of your side, especially if they're not in good faith.
They will probably,
So,
that's
yeah,
what it will
gotta be
probably turn
careful with
into
that.
on their side.
Yeah.
But if you're actually legitimately arguing their side from their actual stuff, I don't know, it'd be super interesting, and I would love to watch somebody do it. I would love to do
Yeah.
it. And I could do it of a Mormon side on just about anything, just because I used to believe it, so I remember all that shit. But yeah, it would be interesting, and it would, I don't know, I just wonder sometimes about this, and I keep going back to it throughout this whole conversation, is I think if they saw you arguing and showing respect to their side and showing you actually know their side, how would that change conversations with them later? because they would have the proof in front of their face that you do know what they're talking about. And because I'm like, I've said before to people, I've said, yeah, I used to believe that very strongly. And it was taking this and this and this and this, And so, I still get asked things like, how could you read the Book of Mormon so many times? I'm like, well, just kept trying to thinking that if I read it one more time, it would make it, I could understand all of it, that it was right. Because they're like, logically, it just doesn't make sense. And I was like, I know. Tell me about it. I know.
Yeah.
And so, those kind of things. But it's like, yeah, yeah, somebody do it. Please do it, Bryce. And if you do, surreptitiously record it and send it to me. Actually, I don't even know if you'll be in a state where you could do that. Legally, if you're legally in court, but yeah, I don't know. I can't hear, but yeah.
Well, and that is tapping into something we've kind of tried to hit on as well, is like building up the rapport can be over the course of just a conversation or cumulative, right? And it can be the case where like, oh, you engaged in this one thought exercise and this one LARP with this one person, last year. So this year at Thanksgiving, now they're more willing to have that conversation with you because no longer are you a, Ukraine waving or flag waving, bleeding heart liberal. You're just you're and you happen to that person, they may be a liberal, but they're the smartest person I've talked to about this, or just showing that you truly understand and that you are seeking to understand where they're coming from can build up that trust over a long period of time and can make you be the one person in their life who is the liberal that they don't fight with every time.
Yeah. And especially what it does is it removes the iconic cartoon character idea of the other side. It makes the other side humans. And that I think is important, because too many things are, this is a bleeding heart liberal becomes, this is what that means. You're woke. Oh, you're being too woke. Well, therefore, and then immediately it's an epithet, and they stop seeing you as an individual, a person with good things and bad things about your personality. You lose your humanity when that happens.
They
And
see you as
so,
a them instead of an us. Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
show them. No, I just want people to have health care.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Or you have this condition. I want you to be able to have health care.
right.
Like, I'm not.
Exactly. I just want to be able to live through next year. Yeah.
Yeah.
No biggie. Oh. I have 3 more lives. I should be allowed 3 more. I've almost died 6 times. I should be able to get to 9.
Do dragons actually have 9 lives? I thought that was only cats.
I know. That's right. Dragons. A phoenix can just live forever. And I'm like, why didn't I pick phoenixes as my favorite animal?
They're nice.
That's my youngest sister, so I can't take that one. But a dragon, they could live forever.
Yeah.
Sure. Why not?
No natural predators. They don't,
No.
they only age to more and more ancient status, which
Exactly.
which makes them more powerful. So
the problem is I don't have a dragon horde. I need a horde.
oh.
I have a horde of dragons, but I don't have a dragon
Your
horde.
dragon horde of dragons.
I need to be living on this pile of gold. Yeah. They did that so well in the movies, the Hobbit movies with Smaug. That was fantastic. Holy shit, that part was fantastic.
I still have to watch them.
Yes, you do. You got to watch them with me. Watch them with me.
Yeah.
I want to watch them
I'm
with
down.
you.
I'm down. Well, we're going to run out of John Wicks for Sunstone pretty soon here.
Yes,
so.
we will.
We have like one more, don't we?
I think one more.
But they said something about doing a 5th one, though. Everything, I don't know if it's accurate or not. I think it might be, but and it might have Charlize Theron in it, but
Sick.
the trailer I saw for it is showing shots of John Wick 1 and 2 and Charlize Theron's Atomic Blonde. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't work for me. So I'm like, I want to know, are you actually putting her in it? Which she'd be great in that. It actually would be fun to see her because usually the woman is the bad guy and fighting
Yeah.
John Wick. So in all of them. So yeah. Anyway, except like
Yeah.
Holly Berry and hers, she's sort
I
of
was gonna
like
say
part
like
of them.
Halle Berry was a really good character.
She
Yeah.
was, but she kind of was both for and against him. But
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. I mean, I
Next
have yet to see
Sunstone,
the
you got to
fourth
come to
one.
my house and watch
Yeah,
it on
we
my
do.
big ass TV. That's too
Yeah,
big
that-
of a
Yes,
room.
yes, that was
Yeah.
nice.
That's the right way to do it for sure.
Yeah,
The
comfy
absolute right way.
couches. And,
Mhm.
yep.
Yeah. And I
I
mean,
know.
Children of Men, for watching an action flick that's based on a non-action novel.
I
That
know.
big screen TV really it brought it to life.
God,
Yep.
I know.
Especially those long continuous shots like
Those
the
were so well
it
done.
was so cool. Yeah.
Holy shit, I liked. Yeah, that was good. That was one thing I love about it. And I love Clive Owen as an actor. And oh, there's so many movies I want you to come and watch on that TV, actually. So
Yeah.
you need to start visiting your in-laws here like quarterly and then
Okay.
spending a
At
day at
least.
my house.
At least, and then just to have an established like movie at Shannon's night every time I come
Exactly.
visit.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm down.
That would work. That would
Yeah.
Yep.
absolutely work.
I have a tradition of when I go for Sunstone, I didn't do it this last time, unfortunately, but I usually go disc golfing with my high school friends because that's it's like we're all busy. We all live in different places now, but whenever I'm in Utah, we can all get together on Sunday morning after Sunstone and go golf at our favorite course up in Ogden. Didn't get to do that this last year, so
No,
maybe
leaving for
this.
that other years.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully this upcoming year I can do that tradition again and maybe start this new tradition of like anytime I
Yes.
visit, we do a movie night, big
We
screen
do
movie night.
movie night, and we can also record here in the Dragon
Yep.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot of fun. And I'll bring the right mics when I do
I
that.
know.
So we don't have that same.
So last
Oh
time.
my God, that made me so mad.
I know. Oh God, that was
Good
funny. I know.
times.
I was like, I like that mic. It's like, if I ever get money, I might buy me one like that. Because I was
Mhm.
like, that thing is cool. Though I got to stay aimed right at it because I was like, moving 2 inches changed the tone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just to turn your head to talk to me. I was like, no, to talk to
I
the
know.
mic, not
I was
me.
like, I need to have it like that, sitting, where I'm like this, where it's when I'm
Right.
looking at you, because it's so much easier when I'm looking at you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I could put you between my two monitors, but on the
Just
other
like,
side of the
peeking
desk.
through a crack, like the telltale heart.
I know. Oh my God.
So we do have to record an episode
We do.
because I'm hopping on a flight tomorrow. So I gotta put the finishing touches on my segments here.
So do I on
And I'm excited. This is gonna be a really, really fun episode, and it's
Mhm.
really appropriate for the whole topic at hand here and
It is.
talking to family. So
I had to work really hard not to reference stuff from this episode that we're gonna do. I was like, don't say it, it's gonna be in the episode.
Well, since it's our patrons who are listening to this and watching right now, should we give them a little teaser what they can expect on Tuesday?
Yes, do.
Sure, why not?
Oh,
Yeah, might as well, right?
Yeah.
What are we doing, Shan?
Want the actual topic?
Yeah, the whole thing.
We're
Let's give 'em a
talking
little sneak peek.
gaslighting.
Yeah,
We're going to talk about
nice.
that.
Did you guys watch the movie?
We did.
Yes.
Nice.
And everything else. So we are going to have some fun.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it was a deeper, darker research for me than I expected.
I guess you'll be editing on the plane then.
Probably. Yep. That's what it's looking like.
Yep. It's nice that you can do that you can bring
Yeah.
your laptop and use stuff
Yep. Absolutely.
during the flight.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the movie was unexpectedly good. It was
Yes.
a damn good movie.
It was excellent.
And yeah, I'm excited about the episode.
It'll be
I'm
fun.
excited to record it. We gotta record it tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited
know,
for
we
it
do.
too.
Hopefully within the next couple of hours we're gonna get started. I gotta polish off my segment though.
Yes.
Um,
There's a couple more things I got to look at for mine and then we'll be good, but I know I'm excited about it.
Absolutely. But yeah, so I think with that, we're gonna cut this live stream to a close at this point.
Yes.
Julie or Joel, did any closing thoughts, anything you want to chime in with before we shutter it? All right.
Okay.
Very cool. This was a pleasure for all of our patrons at patreon.com/glassboxpod. Thank you for supporting the show and thank you for making these live streams possible. We're doing these monthly as best we can. And if you are a patron supporter like Julie, like Joel, you can join in on the panel discussion or you can watch it live on the YouTube channel, which is linked in the notes for this. Or you can listen to the high quality audio that is pulled from the video a couple days after. I usually post that just 1 or 2 days after we do the live streams. So, yeah, but you also get extended editions of every episode, the catching up, the talking, and just, yeah, all
Yeah.
sorts of extra stuff in addition to the outtakes and bloopers, which, come on, that's just good fun right there.
Especially when you give me weird names to pronounce, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, whatever. There's a weird one in this one I had to listen to and then write it out phonetically because otherwise I'm not going to say it right. Oh my God.
So we have a lot of fun over on the Patreon. That's of course where the comments are.
Mhm.
We read those comments on air as well. So lots of extra privileges for our wonderful patron supporters. We love
Yes.
all of you. Thank you all so much for tuning in and making this possible. And we will catch you on the next live stream or on the next episode, which is dropping this Tuesday at the regular time.
Yep.
Cool.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's not
Yeah.
evening yet.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
And good night.
Take care, everyone.
Good night.
Okay. And the